Imagine standing inside your own home, the only place that has ever felt safe to you. The walls know your voice. The floor remembers your footsteps. This is where you learned to walk. This is where your children were born. This is where you believed you would grow old. Now listen closely. Outside, there are screams. They did not start today. They started days ago. At first, they were far away, carried by the wind, easy to pretend they were not real. But screams travel. And today, they have reached your street. Your husband is not here. He left a week ago to defend the city walls. He said he would come back. You already know he will not. Your son is hiding under the house, in the cellar. You told him one thing before you closed the door. Do not move. Do not cry. Do not make a sound. Then the door breaks. 3 soldiers enter. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They move calmly, like men doing work they know well. One grips your arm. Another searches the rooms. The third walks toward the cellar. You hear your son scream your name. That sound will follow you for the rest of your life, if your life lasts that long. Because what is happening to you is not chaos. It is not anger. It is not war losing control. It is a system. And once this system starts, it does not stop. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. The morning the city fell did not begin with fire or shouting. It began with silence. For 3 years, the people of the city had lived with noise. The sound of hammers repairing walls. The sound of soldiers marching. The sound of hunger arguments in the streets. And every night, the sound of the enemy camp beyond the walls. So when the silence came, it felt wrong. No horns. No warning shouts. No clash of weapons. Just still air and a sky that looked the same as it had every other morning. Inside her home, Alyssa sat on the floor with her back against the wall. She had not slept. No one had slept for days. Her body felt light, almost hollow, from lack of food. Her hands would not stop shaking, even when she tried to hold them still. The city gates had fallen at dawn. Everyone knew what that meant. Rome had entered. People like to imagine that conquest is loud and wild. They imagine soldiers running, screaming, killing without thought. But Rome did not work that way. Rome planned. When the Roman legions entered the city, they did not rush. They moved in lines. They followed orders written weeks earlier. Each unit had a task. Each street had a number. Each group of people had a purpose. Alyssa did not know any of this yet. She only knew that the screams were closer now. She stood and walked to the cellar door one last time. Her son was 12 years old enough to understand fear, young enough to still believe his mother could protect him. Stay quiet, she whispered through the wood. No matter what you hear. She waited for his answer. A small knock. One knock meant yes. That was all. The first Roman soldiers reached her street just after sunrise. They did not break doors at random. They followed a list. Some houses were marked for burning. Some were marked for search. Some were marked for processing. Alyssa's house was marked for processing. The door broke inward with a heavy sound. Not rushed. Not angry. Controlled. 3 soldiers entered. They did not look at her face at first. They looked at her body, her age, her strength, her condition. One of them grabbed her arm. His grip was firm, practiced, without emotion. Another walked through the house, opening doors, checking corners. The third paused near the cellar. For a moment, everything stopped. Then the cellar door opened. The scream came next. Alyssa fought, not because she thought she could win, but because her body did not know how to do anything else. The soldier holding her tightened his grip. Another joined him. They did not strike her. They did not shout. They restrained her like workers controlling livestock. Outside, the street was already full. Women stood in small groups, some crying, some silent, some staring at nothing at all. No one met anyone else's eyes. The men of the city were gone, some dead on the walls, some killed in the streets, some taken away to be dealt with elsewhere. This part of Conquest was already finished. What remained was the work. An officer walked between the women. He did not carry a sword. He carried a tablet. He touched arms, lifted chins, looked into mouths, wrote marks next to numbers. He did not ask names. Names were not useful anymore. Alyssa still believed the worst had passed. The fighting was over. She was alive. She did not yet understand that survival was not mercy. It was selection. He square-filled slowly. Women were brought in from every street, every house that still stood. Some walked on their own. Some were dragged. Some carried small children who cried until there was no strength left to cry. Roman soldiers formed lines around the square, not to threaten, to organize. This was not chaos. This was not revenge. This was procedure. Tables were set up in the center of the square. Wooden tables, worn from use. Behind them sat scribes with wax tablets and sharp tools for writing. Beside them stood officers who gave instructions in calm voices. Alyssa watched this from her place in line. She had been standing for hours. The sun moved slowly above them, and no one was allowed to sit. Every woman stepped forward when called. Every woman went through the same steps. First, inspection. Hands checked arms and shoulders, not gently, not cruelly, just firmly, like checking tools before work. Faces were turned left, then right. Mouths opened, teeth counted, age guessed, health estimated, strength judged, then classification. The officer would write 2 or 3 words on the tablet, sometimes a number, sometimes a mark. Alyssa did not understand Latin, but she understood the tone. Some women were pulled aside quickly. Older women, sick women, women with visible injuries. They were taken away to another part of the square. No one saw them again. Others, mostly young women, were told to stand in a different line. That line was longer, and it moved more slowly. When Alyssa reached the table, the officer lifted her chin. He looked into her eyes for 1 second. Not as a man looks at a woman, as a buyer looks at goods. He wrote 2 words on his tablet. Primiforme, first quality. Alyssa did not know what that meant, but she felt the weight of it settle on her. She was given a number. The number was tied to her wrist with a cord. From that moment on, she was no longer Alyssa to the Romans. She was inventory. All around her, the system worked without pause. Women were counted. Tallies were updated. Messengers ran between stations carrying information. By the end of the first day, the Romans knew exactly how many women they had taken. How many were young? How many were strong? How many would survive travel? This knowledge did not come from cruelty. It came from experience. Rome had done this before, many times. The soldiers were not excited. They were not angry. They were tired professionals finishing a job. That was what made it terrifying. By nightfall, the city burned in controlled sections. Not wildfire. Planned destruction. Smoke rose behind the square as women stood watching their lives disappear piece by piece. Alyssa still believed there would be a turning point. That someone would stop this. That something would change. She did not understand yet that this moment was the turning point. Once a city fell to Rome, there was no return. Only distribution. 3 days later, the women were marched to the harbor. The walk took hours, not because the harbor was far, but because the line was long. Thousands of women moved together through streets that no longer belonged to them. The city smelled of smoke and ash. Walls were blackened. Houses stood open and empty. Everything familiar had been stripped away. Roman soldiers walked beside the line, not rushing, not speaking unless needed. Anyone who fell was pulled up. Anyone who could not stand was removed. Alyssa noticed that children were fewer now. Some had been taken earlier. Some were gone for reasons no one explained. When the harbor finally came into view, the noise returned. Ships filled the water as far as she could see. Large ships, strong ships, not merchant vessels filled with goods, but ships built for weight. Wooden ramps led from the docks into the ships' bellies. Ropes hung from beams. Soldiers shouted numbers, not names. This was not an evacuation. It was loading. The women were divided again. Numbers checked. Lists compared. Alyssa's number matched a mark on a scroll. She was sent toward one of the largest ships. As she stepped onto the ramp, she looked back at the city. Smoke still rose from its center. The place where her house had been was lost somewhere behind that smoke. Below deck, the air changed immediately. It was warm, thick, heavy with breath. Women sat pressed together along the walls. Some recognized each other. Most did not. No one spoke. The ship was not empty wood. It had structure. Openings in the hull allowed small streams of air to enter. Channels ran along the floor to carry waste away. This ship had been designed for people. That was the first moment Alyssa understood that this journey was expected, planned, repeated. Once a day, a sailor came down with water and hard bread. Not enough for everyone. The shortage was intentional. Hunger made people weak. Weak people did not resist. Days passed, then weeks. The sea did not change. The sky did not change. But Alyssa did. Her wrists burned where the rope had cut into them. Her thoughts slowed. Time lost meaning. Some women became sick. Some stopped eating. Some stopped waking up. When someone died, the body was pulled away without ceremony. A note was made. The body was thrown into the water. Loss was recorded like damage to cargo. By the third week, Alyssa stopped counting days. She stopped trying to remember faces. This was not accidental. Breaking memory was part of the process. When the ship finally docked, Alyssa barely noticed the land. She only knew that the ground no longer moved beneath her feet. She was alive, and she was about to learn that survival had a price. The ship moored at the port before dawn. Alyssa's body ached. Her hands were raw from ropes. Her stomach ached from hunger. Her mind was empty from fear. When the hold doors opened, the smell hit her first. Oil, sweat, and fear. A mix so strong it made her stomach turn. Women were guided off the ship in groups. Soldiers kept them in lines. No one spoke. No one looked at anyone else. Each person was a number now, a possession. They were led into a large courtyard. Raised wooden platforms stood in the center. Roman men in robes waited, some taking notes, some counting coins, some already whispering numbers. The auction was about to begin. Alyssa was given a new tunic. The simple cloth covered nothing but reminded her she no longer had clothes of her own. Her old life, her home, her name, everything gone. All that remained was her body, her youth, her number. The dealer inspected her carefully. He lifted her chin. He opened her mouth. He ran his hands over her arms and shoulders. Each inspection was precise, practiced, mechanical. He noted her strength, her teeth, her posture, her weight. Then he nodded. She was ready. The auction began. A man stepped forward, coins in hand. He asked questions in Latin. Was she strong? Could she work? Was she fertile? The dealer answered without emotion. Alyssa did not understand the words. She only understood the tone. Everything about her was being measured. Everything about her was being judged. Bidding started low. Coins clinked on wooden tables. The numbers rose steadily. Finally, a man in a robe stepped forward and handed over the payment. Alyssa was his property now. No one asked her consent. No one cared about her past. She had been transformed from a person into an object. The man led her to a waiting cart. Not cruel, not kind, just transactional. She was property. As she rode through the streets, she realized this was only the beginning. Her hair, once braided by her mother, was shaved. Her language, her religion, her name, all would soon be erased. Alyssa would become Tertia, a name that meant nothing, tied only to her place in the system. She had no time to mourn, no time to resist. Her survival was already a cage. Everything she had loved had been stripped away. And yet, inside, something held. A memory, faint and distant, of her son, of her home, of her laughter. The Romans had not yet found it, but they would. The first night in her new home, Alyssa, now Tertia, lay on a hard wooden pallet. Her wrists still burned from the ropes. Her stomach ached from hunger. Her mind ached from memory. She tried to remember her mother's face, her father's voice, her son hiding in the cellar. But the memories were slippery. The longer she thought, the further they drifted. The Romans did not only take her body, they were taking everything that made her human. The first step was her name. Alyssa became Tertia. Any use of her old name was punished. Speak it, and the whip followed. It was a simple rule, but one that slowly rewrote her identity. Next came the language. She was forbidden to speak Punic. Other Carthaginian women were kept separate. No shared words, no shared songs. Memory needed language. Without it, memory fades. Then came the religion. The small amulet of Tarnet she had worn since childhood was taken. Shattered, she was told to honor the Roman gods, obey or suffer consequences. And finally came the memories themselves. Her home, her family, her life before capture. At first, she clung to them. Each night she replayed Carthage in her mind. Each day she repeated her son's name silently. But months passed, years passed, and slowly, the images became foggy. The process was deliberate. Roman households that received slaves did not just want obedience. They wanted a person who had no past, a tool without memory, a body with no story. Tertia tried to resist. She whispered names under her breath. She hid scraps of her language. But punishment was swift. Correction was daily. And the longer she survived, the more the memories faded. After 6 years, the girl who had been Alyssa was nearly gone. Her son's face appeared only in flashes, her mother's voice a ghost of a song. The empire had succeeded in erasing her, and yet, some part of her remained. A tiny spark of awareness that she had been something else once. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it reminded her, in ways the Romans could not touch, that she had been human. This erasure was not chaotic. It was systematic, a plan perfected over decades. It was applied across every conquered city, every woman, every family. The world had been reshaped, not by sword alone, but by the slow, deliberate destruction of identity. The Romans called it civilization. The conquered called it terror. And Tertia was living proof. Years passed, and Tertia lived in the Roman household, her body fed, her hands working, her mind trained to obey. Her hair had grown back, but she no longer recognized it as hers. Her name, once a word that belonged to her, was now just a label. The woman who had been Alyssa existed only in fragments, like a half-forgotten dream. But the Roman system had reached further than individual lives. It shaped entire societies. It forced families to adapt, to hide, to protect what little they could. Villages dug underground shelters. Homes were redesigned with secret rooms and escape routes. Girls were marked, sometimes deliberately, to avoid attracting Roman attention. Marriage traditions changed. Some girls married younger, believing that pregnancy might lower their value to Roman raiders. Some fled altogether, refusing to enter a world where survival meant becoming property. Even after the initial campaigns, the fear lingered. Stories of what Rome did were passed quietly from mother to daughter, father to son. History became a lesson in caution, in survival, in hiding. The memory of those captured women haunted the collective mind, long after the conquests ended. Tertia herself never fully returned to her past. She remembered glimpses, a laugh, a name, a fleeting smile. But Rome had taught her that memory was dangerous. Better to obey, better to survive, better to exist as property than to challenge the system that had swallowed her whole. Yet, despite the erasure, something endured. The knowledge that human beings could be reduced to numbers, measured and processed as if they were goods, left a mark. It shaped how survivors lived, how societies rebuilt, and how people remembered the cost of conquest. And that legacy is not distant history. It echoes in the ways civilizations have treated women, children, and the vulnerable. It is a reminder that efficiency, order, and systems can create horrors beyond the battlefield. The roads, aqueducts, and temples of empires may last for centuries. But the human cost, the lives erased, the identities destroyed, remains etched in memory even when the victors forget. Tertia's story, like that of thousands of women, is a testament to survival, a testimony to the power of the human spirit, even when crushed under machinery of war and control. She may have lived as property, as a number, as a tool, but her existence, her erased past, and the lessons of her life remain. Rome's empire was built on roads and stone, but it was maintained on silence, fear, and human suffering. The world remembers the grandeur, the victories, the conquests. Yet the real story, the lives of the countless women and children, was always hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone to uncover it. And now, as you look back at the story of Alyssa, now Tertia, you see the full machinery. Not war alone, but the careful, systematic erasure of a people's lives. Not chaos, but order made cruel. Not hatred, but efficiency perfected into terror. History remembers the conquerors, but it is the conquered who carry the weight. And through them, the truth endures.